Good evening. I'm Scott Pinsky. I'd like to welcome you to the Marin Coalition and our presentation on marine wildlife. We're delighted you're able to join us. As most of you know, Marin Coalition is an all-volunteer nonprofit public affairs forum based here in Marin County. We welcome all viewers and invite you to become a member by visiting our website, marincoalition.org. All of our programs this year have been presented free to the public via our virtual platform. Before we begin the presentation, let me just give you a brief introduction to our next event, which will be held June 2. On that date, we are pleased to welcome Congressman Jared Huffman, who will be joining us at our platform for the very first time. Representative Huffman will give us his take on the state of affairs in the nation's capital, and I'm sure he'll have a lot to say. Email flyers with registration information will be sent out shortly, probably tomorrow. And once again, that program is Wednesday, June 2 at noon. If you are not on our distribution list and you would like to become one of our email recipients, just go on our website and you can sign up with no obligation. One or two quick technical notes for Zoom. Today's program will be handled through our Q&A button. So to the extent that you have questions, please do not use the chat feature, use the Q&A tab. We will see your questions and we'll get in as many as we can to the presenters when they have completed their presentations. And finally, if you would like to see a live transcript, the subtitles, if you will, look at the bottom tab on your Zoom window and you should see live transcript, which you can activate at that time. Today's program will give us a look at the natural world and its inhabitants with whom we share the ecosystem. Located between the Pacific Ocean and the San Francisco Bay, Marin County is an intersection of wildlife of all types. But as humans, we also cross paths with our neighbors, and it bears remembering that it was their habitat before it was ours. Our interactions with the natural world are frequently hazardous for the animals, but fortunately, the three organizations that are overseen by today's guests exist to offer some protection for and help for threatened fauna. We're fortunate that our region is home to three outstanding centers specializing in wildlife rehabilitation: WildCare, International Bird Rescue, and the Marine Mammal Center. WildCare, located in San Rafael, is nearing its 70th year of delivering world-class medical care to upwards of 3,500 injured, ill, and orphaned terrestrial animals, songbirds, and animals of all description each year in its open admission wildlife hospital. International Bird Rescue, which just celebrated its 50th anniversary, inspires people to act toward balance with the natural world by rescuing water birds in crisis and giving second chances to critically threatened seabirds and other aquatic species through response, rehabilitation, and research. And founded in 1975, the Marine Mammal Center leads the field in ocean conservation through marine mammal rescue, veterinary medicine, science, and education. Our three guests are Dr. Jeff Bohm, CEO of the Marine Mammal Center, J.D. Bergeron, the Executive Director of International Bird Rescue, and Ellen Weisel, the Executive Director of WildCare, who will be our first guest. Ellen served as WildCare's Director of Development before assuming the role of Executive Director in 2019, including serving as Vice President for Corporate Consulting with International Management Group, Vice President of Development at Common Sense Media in San Francisco, and Chief Development Officer of 10,000 Degrees in San Rafael. She feels fortunate to combine her love of education and nature in her role at WildCare. Ellen holds a Bachelor of Arts in History and American Studies from Colby College. Please join me in welcoming our first guest, Ellen Weisel.
Good evening. Thank you very much for having me. Alan, I'll start with the slideshow when you're ready. There we are. Hi, everyone. So we feel fortunate to, as Scott said, be part of this incredible team of organizations doing such good work in Marin County. And I personally am so thankful for the partnership and the leadership and actually the mentorship of both Jeff and JD to me as I assumed this role, especially over the last year during a challenging time for all of our organizations. So WildCare's mission as Scott said, is to advocate on behalf of wildlife for a sustainable world. We were founded over 60 years ago, many iterations of the organization, and finally in 1994 became the organization you all now know as WildCare. We really are the premier organization for wildlife medicine, environmental education, and advocacy in Northern California. We have a complete, next slide, please. And then I will have you go to one more slide. And I'm going to talk a little bit about our complete cycle of programs. So these programs work in connection with each other. And what we like to do is we're able to address urgent issues that humans have, that human impact facing wildlife in our shared environment. Since our inception, we've treated and cared for 120,000 wildlife animal patients in our hospital and engaged more than 1 million children and adults through environmental programming. What we're able to do is we're able to take what we learn in the hospital, apply it to community outreach. We're able to teach those lessons in our wildlife camps. We're able to share our animal presentations with our ambassador animals that we have on site. We're able to take students and adults out into nature through our wonderful nature education programs. We're able to give people advice through our wildlife hotline, and we offer solutions as people call in, and then our advocacy work, which I'll talk about a little bit later. One of the things we've seen this year is an incredible increase in the amount of animals that we treat, as well as the amount of people who've called in to our wildlife hotline. We attribute all of this, of course, to the fact that people are home, they are out hiking, they're in nature, and they're able to see really, I think that maybe the upside of the pandemic is that they're able to enjoy what we have here in Marin County in the natural world, as well as be able to use our resources to help when an animal is in trouble or they have a question, things that have come up, and we are there to help them solve those problems. So our reach is not just the Bay Area, it's actually in the greater San Francisco Bay, and we, as well as across the country. So we get calls from all over the country. If you call and you have a question, we're able to direct people in their communities and tell them where they can find help. So our programs really work together to protect wildlife while strengthening the bonds between people and nature. Environmental education programs are brought to life by the stories of individual patients, as I said, from our wildlife hospital, and then applying that for advocacy work. We seek to prevent wildlife from becoming injured and harmed in the first place. Both advocacy and our educational messages encourage the protection of habitat, making the environment healthier for our recovered wildlife patients. We are teaching a new generation of children to love nature and care for the environment and the wildlife we share with it. Through this complete cycle of programs, WildCare truly helps people live well with wildlife. So next slide, please. We like to say we really are the boundary where people and wildlife intersect. Next slide. So as we go through our programs, as I talked about, and next slide, please, our hospital, our nature education. Next slide, please, our advocacy work. We really rely on the partnerships that we have with the organizations that are also presenting this evening. And as I said, we're really appreciative. One of the things we did want to talk about tonight is some of this advocacy work and some of the things that we're seeing. And I know maybe our guests tonight will want us to talk more about this in the Q&A. But some of the topics that have come up, as you know, are what's happening in Point Reyes with the Tule elk, and we can talk a little bit about that. We can talk about what's happening the Fair Lawns. We've actually had just 2 days ago found out that the Coastal Commission will in fact be postponing any decision on dropping the poisons on the Fair Lawn Islands, and we feel very strongly about there being other alternatives to that proposed program at this time. Next slide, please. One of the things that I love the most about my job is the amount of people who have been touched by our nature education programs and the amount of people who have been touched by Mrs. Terwilliger. And we see people of all generations who come to us, who are donors, our volunteers, who tell us that they first learned to love nature because of their experience with Mrs. Terwilliger. And we feel so strongly about our obligation to carry on her amazing work. And we feel like our education programs have given us this incredible opportunity to teach the next generation to be environmental stewards. Next slide, please. So some of the things we see in our hospitals, we a few years ago did a pretty important study around rodenticide poisoning. And we found that over 70% of the patients in our hospital that we tested had large amounts of rodenticide in their systems. And we were able to share that information with UC Davis and have it inform some of the work that we've been able to do. So that's a good example of what we see in our hospital being able to then share out to our communities. The next thing we do, next slide, please. We've had an unusual amount of fawns. It's baby season here at WildCare. And what we try to do is share with the public and our community really about, when you find a fawn alone, that's the mother's way of protecting it and to leave it. But there are often times that those fawns are brought in. And we've had great success this spring in reuniting a number of the patients that have come into the hospital. Again, sharing the message about living with deer in our community. Next slide, please. Our songbirds, we just did a big Save the Nest. I don't know if you Respect the Nest campaign, and if you're able to, we did a presentation a few weeks ago led by our incredible marketing communications person, Allison Hermanson, our director of animal care, Melanie Piazza, as well as one of our partners, Jim. What we did is we talked about, not trimming your trees in the spring and waiting. We also had seen a large outbreak of salmonella poisoning, and you might have seen our outreach to the community around cleaning your bird feeders, and also making sure that maybe in the instance of the outbreak, taking those bird feeders down. And that's the kind of opportunity we like to be able to take, again, the patients that come into our hospital and then share out that information to our community. So I'm going to wrap it up here. Last slide, please. So our organization has an annual operating budget of about $2.7 million. We have 26 folks on staff. We've had a very unique year, as you all know. We've not been able to have our volunteers here. We've just been able to slowly bring back volunteers over the last few months. So it's been really hard on our staff, the amount of work it takes to continue to deliver on our mission. As with the other partner organizations here, we were all deemed essential services, so we were open throughout the pandemic. And we, as the slide shows here, receive almost no government funding. So we really rely on the generosity of our community to support our work. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our next presenter and say thank you so much for having me, and look forward to answering questions during the Q&A. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ellen. Our next presenter will be J.D. Bergeron from International Bird Rescue. J.D. brings his passion for birds, together with 20 years of nonprofit leadership experience, to the executive directorship for IBR. An unconventional problem solver, J.D. has redirected Bird Rescue's impressive track record of 230 oil spill responses to take on the challenges of the challenges that wild water birds face today. J.D. thrives on finding innovative ways to inspire others to take action. A lifelong lover of nature, he retreats to the outdoors to gain perspective and to soothe the soul. It's my pleasure to present J.D.
Thanks so much, Scott, and thank you all for hosting us tonight. It's not often you get to do a presentation alongside two friends, so really glad to be sharing the stage. I'm going to just make sure that we are on the right version. Scott, can you just confirm that you are seeing not the speaker view, but the correct presentation view?
You're looking good.
All right, thanks so much. All right, so we are starting with one of my favorite photos. This is actually from year 2000, the largest wildlife response ever conducted, 40,000 African penguins, which are endangered. Half of them were oiled and were in the care of International Bird Rescue. So just one of the more impressive moments throughout our 50-year history. My love of wildlife and birds specifically goes way back, along with my affection for bow ties. I think that birds and animals in general speak to this child spirit in us all. And they hopefully the talk tonight will reach that same part of you as well. The goal here is to take that childlike delight and actually connect it with things that we can do in our own communities. Bird rescue exists to inspire people to act toward balance with the natural world by rescuing water birds in crisis. We do the rescuing. We hope that you will find things to do in your everyday, and I'll have some ideas for you on how to do that a little later in my presentation. I love to start out with how many of you have noticed a bird today. I hope that you've seen a few. Maybe it was a mockingbird that woke you up this morning. Maybe it was a crow. Maybe it was a bird visiting a feeder in your yard or passing you as you were walking about your day. As for us, we cared for, fed, medicated, weighed, and did a whole bunch of care for 289 birds today. These are just a few of the examples. On the left-hand side are a clutch of 9 ducklings that actually followed their mom through an oil pit they should not have followed her through. These are very rare wash birds for us, but it points to our specialty, which is in fact decontaminating oiled or otherwise contaminated water birds. And we were born to do this work. In fact, International Bird Rescue was created in response to the 1971 spill that you see in the picture on the right. 800,000 gallons of crude oil right outside the Golden Gate Bridge when 2 Standard Oil tankers collided on a foggy morning. An estimate of about 15,000 birds were affected by that spill. Only about 7,000 were brought into care and less than 300 were actually released successfully. At the time, there was absolutely no idea how to properly care for these animals, how to properly clean them. And bird rescue was created by a registered nurse named Alice Berkner, took the protocols of medical care of humans to the care of these animals. And that was the beginning of the story that has lasted 50 years ever after. We've been at 230 spills and large-scale wildlife crises around the world on all continents except Antarctica. And we have learned along the way, in fact, really developing and sharing practices with the global community. So we were at the Exxon Valdez spill, for example, in 1989. Actually, I'm going to restart my share because I realized that sound didn't go through, but that was the sound of very loud grebes, large Western grebes that were in care. We specialize in large-scale crises, but we actually run 2 full-time wildlife centers, a lot like WildCare, except that we specialize only in water birds. And in fact, the 2 organizations will exchange animals from time to time, depending on circumstances. In fact, WildCare was very kind to take in all of our patients when the fires a couple of years ago got too close to our center, and we are very grateful to them for doing that. We perhaps were best known for being connected to Deepwater Horizon, the 2010 Gulf spill, these very famous photos of that time. Our specialization, as I said, is washing and cleaning the birds, but we also participate in search and rescue and also training of others. And it really comes down to this tagline, every bird matters, one bird at a time. trying to do your very best medically for those birds, the care and food and medications and whatnot that are necessary. We actually have 3 wildlife centers, one in Fairfield, which serves Northern California, one in San Pedro serving greater Los Angeles, and then a full turnkey facility in Anchorage, Alaska, which exists in case there is a spill in that state. We work 7 days a week, all year round, just like the other 2 organizations here. And we generally work with somewhere around 3,500 to 6,000 patient birds every year. As for the Bay Area, we serve Northern California, Mendocino as far north as far inland as Sacramento, as far south as Monterey. And of course, we'll take birds from further afield if they, for whatever reason, would be better served being rehabilitated where we're located. While we are global and international is in our name, I like to reinforce that we are actually quite local as well. So here are just a few of the stories through the years that affected Marin. A number of large oil spills, Costco Busan 2007, multiple spills in Point Reyes and San Mateo and other parts of the coast related to the Jacob Lukenbach, a sunken oil tanker. In that top right corner, that's actually our founder who did a lot of the releases, and we still do in the county of Marin. More recently, there was a rescue of an ashy storm petrel you can see in the bottom left corner. And then one of our more exciting collaborations with Marin-based Audubon Canyon Ranch is to radio tag great egrets. And what you see in that bottom right corner is the track record of one of the birds that was in care and then was released. We do have stories of one of these birds becoming a farmer's favorite ally as the bird is taken up near a barn and gotten rid of a lot of the rodent problems that were there. If we were able to interact, I would be asking you to make guesses on the #1 human-caused challenge that we work with. A lot of folks would imagine it would be oil spills, oil contamination. It is actually fish hooks and fishing line. Our veterinarian does the majority of her work removing fishing hooks, fishing line that have been either ingested, impaled, or have caused grievous wounds like you see on the rightmost photo. And we definitely support all of these programs that encourage folks to pick up after themselves, but we also like to go a bit further and ask folks who maybe didn't leave the thing, rather than grumbling angrily and seeing something on the ground, actually take that moment and pick it up, because you actually will likely be saving a life. Wildlife rehabilitators like the show MacGyver, if you've ever seen it. Apparently there's a newer iteration. I remember the one from the 80s. There are no Band-Aids made for birds. There's no proper medical procedures. Even veterinary school only teaches you how to deal with domestic animals. All of the work that we do has to be invented and developed and tested, and research make sure that it is as effective as possible. And we are always trying to innovate and improve that. Here's an example, a American white pelican with 2 broken legs. We need to make sure that the bird was strong enough, and those fixators that you see are entirely an invention of our veterinarian based on her many years as a jewelry maker. That was actually an effective way, and that bird did very well. Like WildCare, we have struggled with COVID and had to make adaptations, things like locking our front gate and having a doorbell if folks needed to drop off birds, wearing masks, and you can see how challenging it would be in a very wet, humid space washing birds wearing double masks. We've adapted and have fortunately been able to stay open, helping animals the entire time. Sometimes our work looks like this, an adult bird with a injury on its wing. Sometimes it looks like this, killdeer just hatched from the egg. Sometimes it looks like this. 2010 and 2012, there was a huge crash in brown pelican populations, and our aviary was filled with about 100 at a time. And we may be better known for work like this. We do, in fact, use Dawn dish soap. Because it is well tested, we have been working with it for about 40 years. That is, in fact, the same bird on both sides of that image. And I wanted to just tell you a couple of quick recent stories in the Bay Area. Maybe you remember these. There was a mystery spill in the San Francisco Bay in January of 2015 that brought in 300 birds. They looked a lot like this, with gluey substance on them that was not petroleum, which meant that the state's oil response facilities could not go into motion, and we had to take a chance on our own. We had to figure out how to remove this substance without actually knowing what it was. And this is before and after of one of the patients that was most direly affected. Another more recent story a couple of years ago, this one seemed to catch the imagination of the media, so you might have heard it. A tree in downtown Oakland, a large ornamental ficus, had not been trimmed properly and was the home of about 300 nesting egrets and herons. Half of the tree catastrophically split off, tumbling a bunch of birds down to the ground. We had to work with a tree arborist to basically take out nest by nest. We rescued 90 babies and eggs in that rescue, and there's what they look like when they're moving and squawking. Little dinosaurs for sure. And really, it does come down to the care of every single individual, one bird at a time. And to celebrate the successes, this is that bird with the double broken leg I showed a few slides ago. Here's a bird from the mystery goo being released in Marin. And here's one of those babies fully grown and released in Oakland, back where it came from, but in a safer environment. I like this quote. We really have a choice to make. We are in the later days of the age of man. And this writer, Adam Nicholson, suggests that we have a choice to decide to be in the age of empathy and really respond to the challenges of the animals and understanding how to live alongside them. I'm going to show you just a quick video, and then I will be handing over.
I think that they speak to the little kid inside us. What kid hasn't watched a bird fly and not wanted to do that too?
I love birds because each bird is adapted to what it eats, how different their feet are.
I love so many birds. The birds that fly around with colors that look like paint to me. I love just the simple backyard birds.
They can do things that so many other species on the planet can't do. They can see so much more than other species can see.
My name is JD Bergeron. I'm the Executive Director of International Bird Rescue. We are a nearly 50-year-old nonprofit organization. Our history was in oil spill response, and we have responded to over 225 spills around the world. But we also work with injured, orphaned, wild aquatic birds year-round.
With an intake exam, they get a complete full physical exam just to look for any problems.
We have birds that come in from the public and from other centers. They are assessed here by staff and by our veterinarian. Our job here is basically just do whatever it takes to support the birds so they can heal, grow, and then become releasable.
There's so many things that can go wrong for them. The environment is very, very challenging. We've built the world around ourselves. We forget that there's literally tens of thousands of insects and birds and critters that are right around us.
I love getting to come here and work with the birds. They're all beautiful, but getting to see them up close is amazing. Being able to take care of nature is a beautiful gift.
You get closer in rehab to wild birds than you would anywhere else. And to be close up, perceiving them, perceiving you, that sort of eye contact, that connection, it's a pretty amazing thing.
Having those species, those birds come into care, seeing the issues, being able to problem solve and treat those issues, and then getting those birds back into the wild, I don't think anything else could compare.
Very recently, we got a report of a bird that we washed. This bird was in an oil spill in 1996. A bird that survived an oil spill and a wash, went out and had 23 years of life. Who knows how many young that bird brought into the world.
What we do at International Bird Rescue helps make sure that every bird has a chance.
So there's 3 little baby killdeer that we raise. We make sure everything looks good on them. And then if their flight feathers are fully grown out, we get them ready for release. Being able to see the releases happen, knowing that everything we did paid off, we were able to successfully get a bird back out into the wild to give it another chance at life. It's one of those warm, fuzzy feelings inside.
Every bird that gets released, it's really emotional for me. Our supporters, our donors, the staff, the volunteers, all these people line up to help get those 3 killdeer chicks back out in the wild. Every release is absolutely worth it.
I believe in human nature being responsible enough to do our part to make sure that we still always have a place for birds.
We dream of a world in which every person, every day, takes action to protect the natural home of wildlife and ourselves. There's so many things that we can do every single day, and what I hope for is that everyone chooses to do that.
And that is the end. I will be happy to answer questions alongside Ellen and Jeff when the final presentation is done. Thank you.
Thank you, JD. And moving on, our third and final presenter will be Dr. Jeff Bohm, DVM, Doctor of Veterinary Medicine, I'm going to assume, CEO of the Marine Mammal Center. Dr. Bohm leads a dedicated workforce of more than 100 staff and 1,300 volunteers in a mission to advance global ocean conservation through marine mammal rescue and rehabilitation, scientific research, and education. Previously, Jeff served as Senior Vice President of Animal Health and Conservation Science at the John G. Shedd Aquarium in Chicago, where he worked for 16 years. Jeff is a diplomat, I guess that's the pronunciation, has a diploma and is founding member of the American College of Animal Welfare and served as its president in 2019. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Jeff Bohm. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. I really appreciate that welcome and introduction and the invitation of the coalition to be a part of this. Delighted to be here, especially as was said already alongside Ellen and JD. JD, happy anniversary to you. Ellen, I don't know if I ever shared with you, but when I was a kid, summer camp took me to Boyd Museum, your predecessor organization. So local guy, grew up doing what I loved when I was a kid and now doing it as a profession as well. I'm going to go ahead and start to share my screen as well. Okay, so I'm going to presume that many of you know these 3 organizations well, and for at least a few of you, I'm going to guess that we're new. And so I want to tell a story like my friends and colleagues did that's rather holistic of the Marine Mammal Center and give you that kind of thorough grounding. We are the world's largest marine mammal hospital. And by virtue of that, we've got an ocean conservation mandate that reaches and spans the globe. And to give you a sense of proportions, we've all been sharing numbers here this evening. We are 100 staff members, 1,400 volunteers. We have as many as 300 patients on site at a time, as high a number as 1,800 seals, sea lions, other animals in a calendar year, and some 22,000 since we started our work in the headlands in 1975. We respond as do other organizations over a geographic region. Ours is Mendocino County in the north, all the way through south to San Luis Obispo County. And we're over in Hawaii as well with a facility there, working with the endangered Hawaiian monk seal. We have a facility in Morro Bay and in Monterey, in addition to the headquarters that we have here in Marin County. So The work that we do has never been more relevant with the worsening ocean conditions. And a picture like this is probably the wrong one because it's beautiful, right? You go out to the coast, you look out on the ocean or on the bay, it's gorgeous, and it belies the fact that there's so much going wrong. And I don't need to tell an audience like this, but I will. It's the issues of overfishing. It is habitat degradation and habitat loss. It's climate change and the associated problems. There's just so much that human activity has done that threatens the very fabric of the planet, of life as we know it. And we three organizations were just kindred spirits in wanting to do the right thing to rectify that. So the position that we're in, like our peers, is that of being a first responder, right? And bringing these animals in. This is a fur seal, by the way, adorable. Our mission is first and foremost the rehabilitation of that animal. Secondarily, the education of the public, and third, scientific research to understand the issues that these animals face. There's a little harbor seal pup. Every one of these patients, and in aggregate, they're ecosystem indicators, right? So they're telling us stories of what's going on and helping us understand ocean health. It's the proverbial, this ought to be JD's line, but the canary in the coal mine, right? And that is the kind of they're the portal for us into so many other issues and concerns and problems that we face. So every patient that we see is an opportunity for us to gather data, to effect a cure, get a diagnostic plan, get a treatment plan, and get the animals out. I'll share with you some of the things that we see. First and foremost, presenting problem, if you will, is malnutrition across the board. That's basically the bread and butter of what we do, is taking care of malnourished pups primarily. In addition, though, we see infectious diseases. Leptospirosis is a bacterial infection that causes kidney failure in sea lions predominantly. Leptospirosis is something that causes kidney failure in dogs as well. Many of these diseases are shared among domestic animals and wildlife. So we see a whole host of infectious diseases. We also see toxicities. Harmful algal blooms, this group will likely be familiar with. Algae produce a toxin called domoic acid. It gets into the food chain, gets consumed, causes these horrific seizures in sea lions. Almost more disturbingly, though, if it's sub-threshold for seizures and chronic exposure, it causes actual dying away, atrophy of neural tissue, brain tissue. It causes disruption of cardiac heart rhythms and conduction pathways in the heart, I should say. So that's a disturbing one. We also see entanglements, and I'll get into that in a little while. And very disturbingly, we see cancer. And I want to talk to you about that as well. But this is how it presents. This is a harbor seal pup, probably just a day or two old. Mom is foraging while she's nursing. So she's leaving that pup on the beach, much like Ellen's fawn, thinking it's safe. But I would, it would be the rare hiker out in Point Reyes who would come upon a little seal pup like this and not think, oh my gosh, I've got to do something. So like WildCare, we're in the business of saying, no, just leave it be, give us a call, hands off. But it's a pretty compelling drive, just a human drive to help, right? And it doesn't help that these little guys are so cute and they make a plaintive vocalization that sounds like they're saying ma. So it just is a recipe for that kind of thing. So sure enough, they arrive at our facility and are kind of orphaned by definition. Harbor seal moms are shy as well. So a coyote coming down on the beach, a dog off a leash on a beach can do the same thing. But look at that coat, gorgeous coat, but look at the folds over the lower chest and abdomen, those ridges. It's almost like you want to inflate this little guy. And in fact, that's what we do over a matter of weeks. That's that same animal on the left, a little rotund guy, to the extent that his hind flippers are up in the air, in very good body condition. That's what we want to see on their way out. So every year at the center, we're fielding some 10,000 calls from the public. And what that initiates is nothing short of just a wonder in regard to a workforce. I mentioned those 1,400 volunteers. Many of those are at our facilities providing nursing care in really a sophisticated way. Many others are far flung up and down the coastline, and there are caches of the equipment that they need to respond. So our dispatcher will work a phone tree or work an app that they're using now to identify where individuals are with the right training, with the right equipment, with the right group, and the day off to get out on the beaches. And first and foremost, it's about safety. Is it a safe situation? Secondarily, does this animal need our help or not? Often they're just resting and they're fine. They just need to be protected from passers-by. But if they do need rescue, they're brought into our care by very highly trained individuals with all the right equipment to do things safely, get them into a net, into a carrier, into a truck, and on the road to one of our satellite facilities or right to our hospital. And after a stay and the proper care, this is what they like to see, the animals getting right back out into the wild. So along the way, we're amassing data, and this is data that is helping us in the moment. Just so many things were analogous as I was listening to Ellen and JD, but it's the data the veterinarians need to make the diagnosis. But we're also storing that data, be it the results of tests, be it the samples themselves, sometimes taken redundantly, so there's some that can be frozen back. It is the images, the radiographic images, the ultrasound images, the endoscopic images, all of that becomes a resource. When an animal dies in our care, the first thing we want to do is understand why. Second to that, we want to take the tissues, take whatever samples there might be to be had, and bank those away. And so we have a tissue bank that goes back decades that allows us not only to fuel the research of the Marine Mammal Center, but that of our partners as well. We could get a call from a colleague in Oregon who's looking at mercury toxicity and wants samples of liver from male California sea lions between 2005 and 2010, and we can provide that kind of thing. And so we're supporting dozens up into the 30s of other studies that we're only a part of because we're supplying samples. But all of that makes, that chubby little harbor seal that was going out into the ocean, its time with us is done, but there's kind of a ripple effect as the work that care of that animal supports goes on and on and on. Oops. So we're also leveraging this teaching hospital to train the next generation of marine mammal veterinarians. This one appears like she's laughing. I didn't quite catch that before, but the seal must have told a good joke. We, as an organization that has as many patients moving through it as we do, it's very attractive to individuals who are veterinary students themselves, who are recently graduated veterinarians, who are veterinary residents in training programs, or even professional veterinarians in their own right, to come and train with us. And they'll come for days, weeks, months. We have one program that's a year long. When they're not coming to us, we're often going to them as well. We have a program that's an international veterinarian in residence program that has attracted veterinarians from Colombia, from Chile, from Mexico, from Thailand, from Korea. And our goal at the end of the day is that anywhere on the planet where there's a marine mammal that's in need, there will be someone, some entity, some group that will be there to respond. So our work is not going to be quickly done in that regard, but it's an aspect of our work of which we're very proud. So I'm going to transition there because in addition to the rescue, the education, the research that we do, we've, as of the last 5 years or so, really started to look at how do we take that scientific grounding and present that and get a seat at the table where there are discussions around policy, around legislation, where we can mitigate the risks that our patients are facing, where we can remove the problems that are bringing animals into our care. And I want to give you a few examples of that. So San Francisco Bay, you see the city, you see Alcatraz in the background, you see a big whale in the front. That's a gray whale. That is the backside of Angel Island, where the animal is likely towed, and what is going to be conducted is a necropsy and autopsy for animals to understand what we can of why this animal died in our waters. Sometimes it's quite obvious externally, sometimes it takes samples and dissection, and sometimes it takes further microscopic analysis of those tissues to come up with the complete answer. All the while, we're doing the same thing we would do at home base, and that is amassing as much data as we can to share with the scientific community. Disturbingly, many of these are coming in with evidence of having been struck by ships. And the evidence can be quite alarming. It is externally visible contusions, big hematomas, broken ribs, broken vertebrae, really ghastly slices from props, a real problem. And there's no ship captain out there who wants to strike a whale, I'm certain. And so what we're trying to do is work with the shipping community, work with the sanctuaries, and work with the harbor pilots to best understand how we can mitigate these risks. We have a research team that is trying to identify where the animals are occupying space in the bay, where the shipping lanes are, what the speed of the animals are, what the speed of the ships are, to pony that data up so that the sanctuaries can add credence to their assertion that vessel speed reduction, which is voluntary right now and seasonal, ought to be permanent. And with that data, they get more, certainly more credibility and more impetus for that argument. Move on to another example. It's an ultrasound examination of a sea lion, just demonstrating one of the tools we use to diagnose cancer. So you might be thinking, cancer in a sea lion, that's odd. Well, there's cancer, in a lot of species, and all of us are impacted by friends, family, acquaintances we know, and a variety of cancers, right? Well, this is one type of cancer in California sea lions, a urogenital cancer of both males and females that first appears in the cervix of the female, the penis of the male, and might be a really, really apparently benign lesion, but it metastasizes. And so it goes to the regional lymph nodes, it goes to the spinal column, it invasively damages vertebrae, it goes to the nearby bladder, the ureter, the kidneys. And what we see is fully 1/4 of the adult sea lions that come into our care, that die in our care, have cancer. And that has the attention of oncologists who study wildlife, certainly, but it also has the attention of oncologists who study people. Your MDs at Stanford or UCSF are looking over our shoulder at this cancer cluster of wildlife that happens to be dining on the same fish that we manage for human consumption. We see a virus in these animals, a herpes virus, and we see an accumulation of long legacy chemicals, DDTs, PCBs, flame retardants, et cetera. So a sobering issue to be sure, but a model perhaps in wildlife for us understanding risks to people as well. Some of these get pretty dire, I'm sorry, but this image speaks volumes, and I thought it worth sharing. This is a sea lion that is entangled with fishing line around its neck, a very common occurrence. I would bet that if you went to Pier 39, went down to the harbor at Moss Landing, you would see animals festooned with fishing line. Our challenge is getting an animal like that safely sedated to bring it into care when it's a mammal that lives in the water, right? So you use a dart gun and it's going to bolt into the water. What we've devised is the right formulation of sedatives and anesthetics, as well as a dart. If you see in the bottom of the screen, the red on the cylinder, that is a dart that was deployed into the shoulder of the animal. The injection is made, but the dart stays on the animal. It has an acoustic device on it, and we have a complementary device we can deploy from the boat that can listen for where the animal is. So if it dives, we can be right on it, get it into safe care, get it sedated, anesthetized. You can just see how gruesome these injuries are. Day one of an entanglement, no problem, but over time, the wear, the growth of the animals leads to these really heinous injuries, which can clearly be fatal. Thankfully, if vital vessels, the trachea, et cetera, has not been hit, they'll be just fine over time with the removal of a line like that. Often done, that was a different animal, obviously, in a hospital, and we are doing this in the field as well. We're training individuals in Mexico, in Baja, to do this, which is where this picture was taken, as well as an invitation a couple of years ago over to the Pacific coast of Russia to do the same work that won't quickly be done. Whales are no stranger to entanglements as well. The work is very sophisticated. It takes highly skilled individuals to get out on the water to do this. The clearance to do this work is only through NOAA Fisheries, and we work under an authorization from NOAA Fisheries. This just gives you another startling image of just how much damage can be done. I'm not going to park on that image. And this gives you a visual description of just how fraught with peril this work is. Our insurance agents get a little uptight when we are doing this work, but we got to do it, right? And these teams will be out with long poles to which are fixed GoPro cameras that can be used to identify where the ropes are, so that if you're going to have a cut, you're making the right cut on the animal. Safe knives that are, again, at the end of these long telescoping aluminum poles. You're in a boat moving with a whale that's moving and trying to cut a rope, sometimes 20, 30 feet away from you. Really phenomenally rewarding work when it succeeds, and really desperately disappointing when you don't get the chance to make that cut. So where's the solution in this? This is where we're sitting at the table with groups like the Dungeness Crab Working Group. So the Dungeness Crab Fishery, again, people who fish do not want to lose their traps, they do not want to lose their ropes. How can we devise ropeless fishing gear? How can we, again, bring our data to the table to say, this is a problem, here's the proportion of this problem, here's the visuals to make it clear how compelling this problem is. How do we find solutions? And being not oppositional, but being collaborative and solutions focused. Aquaculture. 3 billion people on the planet rely on seafood as their primary protein source. So aquaculture is a thing that ought to be a thing, but it ought to be done right. And being done right means considering not just the fish and the welfare of the fish within the pens, but the environment around the pens, which includes other marine life, including marine mammals. And it just so happens that these are very attractive to marine mammals, as you would expect. So how do we insinuate ourselves into the discussion? So as legislation and policy is created, we're developing systems that take into account how to mitigate the risk of entanglement with marine mammals. And should there be an encounter with a marine mammal, how do we train the personnel who are manning these aquaculture facilities to know how to deal with these animals in the first place? Elephant seal pup. So the title here was around challenges and solutions, and our vision is an ocean, a healthy ocean for humans and wildlife alike, right? So there's there's a tension in that inherently. There is the challenge, but I would just state that, you know, our work, our partnerships, our resolves, that's where the success sits, and that's where I was inspired by JD. I was inspired by Ellen, and am by them, and you know, dozens of like organizations in California, and certainly many more in this country and around the world. People who are supported by people like all of you, who want to do the right thing by the environment. So it's an uphill climb for sure, but I'm inspired and motivated and driven by the community we're a part of. So I will close there. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff, for a very inspiring presentation. And I'll say the same thing about Ellen and JD. The work that you all do, the commitment that you have, the sensitivity and awareness is inspiring to me, and I'm sure to many others on the program today. Before we jump into questions, first of all, if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A tab, and we will forward those on to our presenters. Before we get to specific questions, though, one thing I'd like to invite each of you to discuss is what can we do as far as being members of the community, other than obviously donating. But if we wanted to volunteer, if we were interested in bringing skills to bear to each of your organizations, or if we didn't have specific skills that we felt were particularly appropriate or translatable to your mission, what can we do? Can we be of any use to you? If so, what's the best approach that we would take? And by the way, before you go ahead and let us know that, what we will be doing at Marine Coalition is to put onto our website contact information for each of these three organizations, so that if after the program you do want to get in touch with one or several of them, you'll know how to do that. So you can find that on our website, but obviously they all have their websites as well. And let me just throw that question out. What would someone do if they felt they wanted to get involved?
I'm going to jump in, because you could be Scott and his wife Tony, and you could foster baby animals after some training. So that's fantastic, and we thank you for that. We couldn't have gotten through the last year actually without our foster parents and community who were willing to take home baby animals that were in our hospital, and we just didn't have the resources without our volunteers. And so years of people volunteering and being trained, and then able to help us out in a way we wouldn't have ever anticipated during the pandemic. And then I would just say, you know, we are so lucky in this community, because the success is that people in this community care about the wildlife, they care about the environment, they have the opportunity to bring those patients to us. You know, they have a better rate of success if they come to our hospitals, any of the three of us, and we can hopefully rehabilitate them, treat them, and get them back into the wild. And aren't we lucky that we live in a place where people really take the time, and you see it in their faces. And I'm sure that Jeff and JD would say that, you know, being able to watch a rescuer come to WildCare and hand over a patient and feel like there's a place that's supported by this community that is going to do the right thing by this animal. And the fact of the matter is 99.9% of the time, it probably has been impacted by, you know, all of us and the human impact on our wildlife. So I'll stop there, but thanks again, Scott, and thank you to your wife.
I'll jump in next. I mean, you heard from all three of us, there are copious amounts of volunteer support needed to make this work possible. This is not a make big bucks kind of business. This is lean deeply into the heart and wanting to make a difference. All three of our organizations train people to do the work directly with animals. There's lots of opportunities even in the office side of things. At Bird Rescue, we struggle. Everyone wants to work with the birds and no one wants to help us with filing. So There are things as simple as transporting animals. In fact, animals move quite frequently between WildCare and bird rescue. That itself can be incredibly gratifying. If you're feeling like you want to make a difference nearer your home, I've been talking with one of Jeff's colleagues a bit about learning how to recognize wildlife in distress and baby animals that are not in distress, how to sort of teach other folks. These are simple lessons, like birds, so many baby birds, but I know baby seals this happens to as well, essentially are kidnapped because people think they are doing the right thing. They absolutely are feeling the right thing, but just don't realize that the animal is actually in better care with its parents, who maybe have just stepped away for food, slipped into the water, stepped just out of sight. So there are simple things, picking up, cleaning up everywhere that you see things. I think that it cannot be repeated enough. I'll give Jeff a chance to answer as well.
So I'll start by saying yes, and so everything everyone said, absolutely. I mentioned when I was presenting that our work has never felt more urgent, and I would think if you think of the issues of environmental distress and conservation writ large, that's the case. And so I guess what I would say is everything does take resources, right? And this is a group that will already be leaning in on donating, volunteering, doing the right thing in their personal practices, I'm going to just assume. But can you consider ways that you can amplify the message, that you can share the message, that you can bring 5, 10 others into the fold, that you can offer us introductions to those who know people who might be able to influence significant transformational gifts? Because I would tell you that Ellen and JD have plans that they want to execute against, but for the resources. So that would be my appeal. Use your passion for the kind of work that we do to bring others into the fold.
Helps if I unmute. Sorry about that. Okay, let me start going into the Q&A. We have a question from Hans Schmidt asking about ship strikes of whales. He says, these are a big problem. I wonder why whales cannot avoid ships, since they are relatively intelligent and have a good navigation system. Any thoughts on that? I guess that would be for Jeff.
Ellen, would you please?
You're funny.
So that's an obvious question, right? I mean, they are, dolphins, whales, known for their intelligence, and yet hardwired for eons to behave in a certain way, right? And the deep dives and the quick ascents and the just lack of awareness of risk and the speed of those vessels just seems to be a recipe for really dramatic trauma. And you add to that it's like going into the mall through a narrow passage. That Golden Gate Strait is but 1 mile wide, and you put a giant vessel in there and a few whales, collisions are going to occur. But it is Hans, I agree, it's counterintuitive, but it clearly is an issue. And vessel speed reduction is, I believe, part of the solution.
And whales did not evolve with ships.
No.
Let me ask something that I think you might all want to touch on. And I think, Ellen, you raised this in your remarks earlier about the Farallon Islands rodenticide program. And I will admit I have not followed that as closely as obviously each of you has, but I know there was a proposal to essentially drop tons of this poison in order to eliminate rodents on the island that truly have overtaken many areas of that ecosystem. And there are obvious questions as to the safety of that, the efficacy of that, the wisdom of that. And I know there are different points of view. So if that's something that you'd care to talk about, I'd be interested in knowing, first of all, what is the status? Because I understand it's evolving. And then secondly, what are the pros and cons? And does your particular vantage point give you a strong feeling that it should be one direction as opposed to another? Ellen, did you want to start? Because I think you talked
sure.
about it.
I'll start. So this is a really interesting topic, and our group, including Nancy at Marine Humane, has met on a lot of topics. And one of the conversations, I think we actually met twice on this topic, because we as organizations actually look at this different ways. And so we're going to probably right now share with you our differing views on what makes the most sense around the situation in the Farallones. They have.
Can I just ask, before you jump in, for those that aren't aware of the issue, how did it arise that we're at this point of needing such a dramatic resolution?
You know, I'm going to actually turn it over to JD, because JD actually has firsthand experience with this topic, and I'm going to let him maybe give a little background. I actually, as you all know, came to WildCare as a director of development, and was the interim executive director, and then became the executive director. So I'm I've not been involved with this as long as some of the other folks here. So I'm going to let JD maybe start by talking about it, and then we'll talk about maybe WildCare's perspective based on what we've seen in our hospital and our rodenticide study.
Yeah, this is definitely one of those really difficult topics in which you really have friends on all sides of the issue. What Ellen is referencing is I spent 5 weeks on Midway Atoll in the winter season, counting nesting albatrosses. Midway Atoll, once upon a time, had a horrible rat problem, and it currently has a rat problem that was actually solved with poison. And it currently now has a mouse problem where during drought years, the mice actually parasitize, they eat the adult albatrosses on the nest. You talk about why don't whales swim away from boats? Why don't large beaked birds that could snap a mouse in half defend themselves as they're being literally chewed upon? It was a horrible discovery of just a few years ago. I want to underline, there are no winners when you're talking about things like rodenticides. It is a horrible, horrible death for the animals. It is a terrible thing for the environment. My perspective definitely comes from seeing 500,000 bone-in petrels, the species that was nearly eradicated by rats because they burrow underground, and the need to get rid of the mice. These large-scale processes of dropping poisons, we talk about the weight of the poison, which I think somehow puts the focus in the wrong place, in my opinion. Gough Island, South Georgia Island, the off the coast of South America, is a huge, important habitat, not just for albatrosses, but for sea mammals and lots of other animals in the area. They have now successfully done both a rat and mouse eradication and are already seeing turnaround in the numbers of seabirds. As an organization that works with seabirds, of course, my concern first is for the native seabirds that live on the Farallones. The mice are result of us. People bring rodents that are not meant to be in a habitat, and we talk about invasive, even cats, the proliferation of cats. Probably never thought of a duck or a duckling being catchable by cats or having a cat bite, and that happens to us quite frequently. So I support the idea that the best possible decision has to be explored, and I agree with WildCare that the rodenticide, there's a reason these things need to be outlawed. The horrible death that they give, not just to the rodents, but actually to those things that predate, that eat rodents. You know, we had even an owl box outside our center. We don't use any poisons near our center. when we finally cleaned it out, it actually had 2 dead adult barn owls, as well as several dead chicks and an uneaten rodent. Someone in the neighborhood poisoned the rat, and it poisoned the whole family. So while I think that I look to the scientists and the researchers who looked into this problem and hope that they have done a very thorough process. It was certainly a very extensive one that took many years. I look to the success of it working on places like South Georgia Island, Midway Atoll. And again, bottom line is it's a horror in any direction. So they're currently having an issue on Farallon Islands, even with a pair of nesting owls. And there's a photo I just saw recently of a bunch of beheaded auklets, little tiny seabirds that nest on that island, who have never had to face a killing predator like an owl like before. And these are the repercussions. Mice draw other predators. The seabirds are not adapted for it, and one way or the other, there will be either no seabirds or no mice. And from my side of it, the math is in favor of the animals that belong on the Farallons. It's very complicated. It's again, we've had very friendly and challenging conversations. It's actually one of the reasons I so deeply appreciate these partnerships, Ellen and Jeff and Nancy, because we can have these kind of conversations, and yet you know, I can hear the valid arguments entirely on the other side of it as well.
Ellen, did you want to comment on that, or Jeff?
Yeah, I'll let Jeff go, and then I'll circle back.
Yeah, thanks. Really appreciate the way you laid that out, JD. And JD and my views are somewhat similar on this. We came as an organization into this. You might think, why are you concerned about what's going on an island? You're about the water around the island. And that's exactly the situation where the proposal was put in front of us during a public comment period, and a consideration was asked of us as to what impact it might have on local marine mammals in the water. And there, to JD's point, I think the science was strong that regardless of what one feels about rodenticides, the proximate risk to marine mammals in the water was nil. And yet, all of us get asked all kinds of questions about wildlife, and that's fair game. And we ought to have a view, and we ought to know when we're in our lane and when we're not, right? And make that clear. But our volunteers are Ellen's volunteers, are JD's volunteers, and so they come with these issues and their care, and we ought to have informed opinions on it. And I think what JD said was right with regard to a certain amount of faith in the process and the scientists whom we know or are closely connected to in making the right assessments. But the passions behind these issues are fierce, and you know, it arrives at our facility around how do you feel about zoos and aquariums, right? And boy, talk about a polarizing kind of issue. It can be significant. And so I think we're all our best when we're grounded in science. We're also empathetic to what the other group and or individual across the lunch table is bringing to the conversation, and we respect one another. There's no win here. There's lesser evils depending on whether you're thinking of the individual and the residual risk of the rodenticide, or if you're thinking of the population and its stability and sustainability on an island. So.
Yeah, thank you. So, you know, again, what happens for us is that, you know, we've done these studies and seen patients admitted into our wildlife hospital who carry toxic anticoagulant rodenticides in their system, you know, and so we worry about the unintended consequences of the use of these poisons. And the intended purpose is to eliminate a nuisance rodent problem, but the poison doesn't stop within the rodents, and we know that and we see that. And so for WildCare, we know that these poisons travel up the food chain, and killing or debilitating both the target animals that consume the poison and the animals that consume those animals. So you run into, you know, the idea of, you know, the Western gulls is one of the you know, conversations that comes up, and proponents have acknowledged that there'll be some level of Western gull exposure to the poison on the island, and that level's open to debate. And there's been conversations about the hazing of the gulls and the efficacy of that hazing. And, you know, we really feel like we need to explore all options. And I think that's where, so the Coastal Commission, and maybe we can, I know there's other questions, the Coastal Commission has now delayed any decision at least until fall. And that decision just came down this week. So nothing will be done until fall. So at this point, it's sort of a pausing again of a decision to be made about this. But, you know, I will reiterate that we feel very strongly that this isn't the right course of action, but we also completely respect and understand our partner organizations and the way they feel about, you know, sort of the best, what is the best course of action here. So I'll leave it at that, but thank you very much.
Well, thank you all for very candid and obviously well thought out discussions on this. And is this what you call a Hobson's choice? I mean, there really is no good resolution here, and it's a shame that we're facing such a difficult choice. And we will see what happens. And I hope people will follow this, because it's a big issue out there. And maybe something will come up that will be a better resolution than the options we're looking at. I don't know. I sure hope so. Let me move on. We have a question from Molly Flanagan. First of all, thank you so much for all of the incredibly vital medical care that you provide. How does each of you think about the psychological and or emotional impact of the treatment on the animals while they are in your care? Obviously, they're taken out of their natural habitat. They're surrounded with these alien human beings in an alien environment, and then hopefully they're rehabilitated and they're released. But during their period in your care, any thoughts about what kind of an impact that has on them?
I'll jump in first. First, I want to compliment Molly for her astuteness. I think a lot of folks tend to take all of the sort of pet domestication messages we get on TV and in media all the time, and sort of the desire to love the animals and to have them love us back. We are not at all interested in these animals ever becoming acclimated to us. In fact, we like them when they are bright and responsive. Bright and responsive means bitey and trying to escape us. And we fully acknowledge that every moment they are in our hands for care is actually a really terrible moment for them. A strange and terrifying predator has got them in their hands. And so we need to be efficient. We need to do the work carefully. In the case of birds, covering their heads, covering their eyes, the way that you see in falconry actually does reduce some of the stress. It wouldn't work for us. If you throw a towel over my head, I'm not going to relax at all as you grab and poke me. In fact, we go so far that birds that do become accustomed to us, so a duckling or a heron, baby heron that approaches the door when we come in with food, actually then needs to go through a process called hazing, which actually reteaches them people are bad news. We will wear actually protective clothing that hides our human form with some of the more imprintable species like cormorants. So it really is taken very, very seriously. The wash process is probably the worst day of that animal's life, maybe second only to being contaminated. And we want to do it quickly, efficiently, and hopefully not to handle that bird not even a minute longer than is absolutely necessary to get it clean. Those are the things we work toward. We also don't talk near enclosures. We don't peek in enclosures. We basically try to allow those animals to have as natural a healing environment as possible. So There's a lot of ways to do this, and I know that all wildlife rehabilitators, not just these three organizations, this is rule number one. If you make that animal a domesticated animal and it loves people, it is not going to survive in the wild, and it could actually become dangerous for other people.
Yeah, I'd agree with all of that, JD, and want to bring in another aspect of it as well. And I think, Molly, you were asking about the negative and or stressful impact of the care that we provide, right? We know there's a greater gain in the long run. The other thing we're thinking about more often is, what about those 18, 20 hours a day that they're just sitting in a pool on a hillside, and they're a harbor seal pup that came in at 2 days of age and is released looking all fat and sassy at maybe 12, 16 weeks. But where's the behavioral stimulation? Where is the learning? Where are the opportunities for psychologic care, behavioral care, as well as the medical care? And so we're working with a PhD student up at Davis who is doing some work with our patients, providing things like really unsophisticated looking but clever, a box with a lid that is weighted that sits on the pool floor that has fish in it. It's a puzzle of sorts that the animal has to manipulate in order to get the fish out. It's breath holding, even if it's only in 6 feet of water. It's stimulated mentally. It's physically employing skills of dexterity and all the rest. That ought to be part and parcel of our care with the mammal species that we work with. Very different for all the species that Ellen and JD work with. But I think just as a rehab community, we're becoming more holistic about care, and not just medical and nutritional care, but behavioral care as well, especially for neonates.
Yeah, and I would just touch on the fact that, one of the things we make sure here is trying to get animals, especially during baby season, getting babies with other. So recently, if you have a raccoon, a baby raccoon that's come in, trying to find another, if we don't have any of the same age, to get them to a partner organization so that you're raising them together and creating that bond and not bonding with people. But it's really, we do similar things at JD, making sure you're covering heads, trying to be quiet in the hospital, making sure that, we have a lot of high stress animals, fawns that come in, and how do you make sure that you're creating the best possible chance for that animal to go back into the wild and be successful? And that's everybody's goal here. The one thing I did when I first saw that question, I was thinking about the animals, but it made me think of also our staff and the work that they do. And something that we've had to spend a lot of time on here that's been really important conversation is around compassion fatigue for our staff members and our volunteers around the work that we do, because it's also really hard work for, we have to euthanize patients. We have, patients that don't make it every day here in our hospital, and that work that our humans are doing, takes quite a toll as well. So it's a lot of sort of thinking about the mental health of our animals and of our staff and of our volunteers in ways that I think is crucial to be able to do the work we do every day.
Definitely so. And I know that everyone that's watching now appreciates that work and is inspired by your presentations today. I know I am. Unfortunately, I think we're out of time. I have to wrap it here. I wish we could keep going because I've got a few more questions. I'd like to hear, frankly, about the Thule elk situation, but I really don't think that we can take the time. Maybe on our next one, and I hope we'll do this again. So I'm going to thank everyone for joining us today. I'd like to thank our presenters, JD Bergeron, Dr. Jeff Boehm, Ellen Weisel. Ellen Weisel. I knew I'd get that wrong. Thank you, each of you, for coming, joining us, sharing your thoughts with us, inspiring us. We're going to put your information up on our website. So those that would like to follow this up, either through donations or through volunteer work or however you want to do so, you can find them online. Please remember our next presentation is June 2nd at noon with Congressman Jared Huffman. Hope to see many of you there. We'll get out information on that shortly. I'd like to also give a shout out and thanks to our webmaster, Alan Shavitz. Always a fantastic program. Thanks to Alan. Thank you all again. Sorry to have to cut this off. I wish we could go on, but our time is out. And so I'm going to thank you all for joining us. Hope to see you all next time. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you for having us. Be well.
Thank
Thanks
you,
so
you
much.
too.
Bye.